Recent real estate surveys show there are 5 questions just about every home seller is asking right now. So, over the next few videos, we're going to break them down one at a time. And we'll start here with the number one most asked question: what's my home worth? That's one of those questions that's really best answered in a quiet setting, not in a 1 minute elevator conversation. Because at the end of the day, price, condition, and location, they're all tied together. And it doesn't stop there. Everything we do from a marketing standpoint, the photography, the presentation, the storyline, the positioning, it all has to meet or exceed a buyer's expectations. Not just when they walk through the door, but when they first see it online. And that's not easy to do. It's not easy for the seller, and it's not easy for the broker. Because in this market, we have to get it right. And no amount of personality is going to make up for lack of experience. We're not in that wild seller's market anymore where you could throw a number out there and the market would chase it. Things have settled down. There are still buyers, good buyers, but they're more careful now. They're comparing everything, looking at condition, looking at value, and whether we, brokers and sellers, like it or not, a lot of buyers are even using AI tools to help them figure out what something should be worth. So as a seller, you don't really get the benefit of the doubt anymore. I actually did a video recently. Can ChatGPT really price my home? And the short answer is yes and no. It can give you a range, it can pull data, but ChatGPT doesn't walk through your house. It doesn't feel the location. It doesn't understand why one waterfront lot is worth more than another just down the shore. That's where experience still matters. Here's where I'm seeing people get tripped up right now. First, homes that need work. A couple years ago, buyers would overlook a lot just to get into the market. That's not happening as much anymore. If a home needs updates, repairs, or just feels dated, buyers are hitting that price pretty hard, sometimes harder than sellers expect. Second, and this is a big one, the $1 million to $2 million value range. That buyer is the toughest one to get a commitment from right now. And it's not because they can't afford it. It's actually the opposite. They're willing to spend serious money, so in their mind, they should be getting something really special. And that's where things get tricky, because that feeling isn't grounded in what homes are actually selling for right now. It's an emotional response that seems logical to them. They're thinking, if I'm spending this kind of money, it better be really nice and check all the boxes. So what do? They start looking in both directions. They'll stretch upwards, maybe pay a little more, for something that clearly stands out, no compromises, great location, great lot, move-in ready. But at the same time, they're just as willing to drop down in price, buy something in the right location with a great piece of land, and say, we'll put the money into it and make it our own, as long as it feels like a value. This is the only price range where buyers are seriously looking up and down at the same time. This is where indecision lives. And at this price point, in their mind, pretty good just doesn't get it done. So when you ask, what's my home worth? It's not just about what sold down the street. It's how your home compares to what's on the market right now, what condition it's in, and how a buyer is going to feel about it the second they walk in or see it online. And I'll say this, because I think it matters. Pricing a little high just to see what happens, that strategy is not working like it used to. And if you use it, what happens now is you sit, you lose momentum, you end up chasing the market down, and you are not in control of the negotiations. You are at the mercy of the market, and no seller wants to find themselves there. But with that said, it doesn't mean you have to leave money on the table to get it sold. There is a way to approach pricing, positioning, and marketing so you don't lose control of the process. How you come to market in a position of strength, how you create the right kind of attention early, and how you let the market respond. It's all within your grasp. Done right. That's how you protect your negotiating position. And that's how homes tend to sell in that first 5 to 10 day window. Not by chasing the market, but by positioning ahead of it. Speed isn't the goal, control is. Speed is just what happens when you get it right. If you're thinking about selling or even just curious, I'm happy to take a look and give you a real answer. Unlike some brokers, I won't tell you the highest number just to get your listing. I won't be the lowest either. I'll tell where it actually sits in today's market, because getting that number right from the start, that's what you deserve, and that's what makes everything else work. Recent real estate surveys show there are 5 questions just about every seller is asking. Welcome back to the HRG TV studio. The other day we started a video series where we cover these questions, and we started with, what's my property worth? Today we jump into the next most popular question, which is now a good time to sell? If you list at the wrong time with the wrong approach, you lose leverage. You want leverage. You need it to maximize equity. You need it to get the best possible terms for yourself. And if you do it right, you create leverage. That's the difference. In a perfect world, you'd list your home when demand is high and inventory is low. That's when you have the most leverage. But it's not a perfect world, and you don't always get to pick that moment. So the real question is, how do you create that leverage at any moment in any market? Right now, inventory is low and buyers are still out there, but they're more selective. They're comparing everything. So timing alone, it doesn't guarantee anything anymore. What matters now, more than ever before, is how you come to market. Let me say that again. What matters now is how you come to market. If you come on too high, you sit. You lose momentum. You start chasing the market down. You've lost your leverage. Remember, you want leverage. If you come on the market dialed in, you get attention early. You get showings. With activity, you sometimes get competition. And that's when you have leverage. And with leverage, that's where you have options. That's where you have control. So the perfect time to sell is when you are prepared to sell. There are prepared sellers and unprepared ones. Prepared means priced right, presented well, positioned to stand out, because if you check those boxes, you can create demand in almost any market. If you don't, it doesn't matter what month it is. So when someone asks me, is now a good time to sell? My answer is, it can be, if you approach it the right way. You can't control the market, but you can control how you enter it. If you want to talk through the timing, or if you want to discuss what your home is worth, I'm happy to do that. Keep in mind, timing matters, but preparation and positioning is what drives the result. We continue our series on the 5 questions just about every seller is asking right now. Welcome back to the HRG TV studio. We've covered price and we've talked about timing. Next seller question is this: what should I do to prepare my home for market? Most people think this is about cleaning up, maybe doing a little staging, and yes, that's part of it. But if that's all you do, you're missing the bigger opportunity. Getting a home ready for the market isn't about making it look nice. It's more about removing reasons for a buyer to hesitate. Because here's what happens. If a buyer walks in and starts noticing things that need work, they don't say anything. They just start adjusting what they're willing to pay. And they usually adjust it more than you'd expect. Even worse, if there's too many items to be done, no matter how small, they may just walk away. So before you list your home, look at everything through these 3 lenses: condition, presentation, and distractions. It's all about expectations. What are they expecting to see? Condition is the big one. If something is obviously worn, broken, or dated, it's worth having a real conversation about fixing it. Not everything needs fixing, but the right things do. Buyers today are not as forgiving as they were a few years ago. Presentation is what people expect. Clean, decluttered, simplified are the minimum today. You want a buyer to walk in and focus on the space, not your stuff. That brings us to the distractions. Personal items, bold choices, anything that pulls attention away from the home itself. Those things matter more than people think. The importance of preparing your home, it really can't be overstated. In this market, we have to meet or exceed buyer expectations. And that's not just on you, and it's not just on me. That's something we do together, owner and broker, making sure the home shows the way it should. not just in person, but online too, because that's where the first impression happens. We want them to experience the home they looked at a dozen times online. And through the preparation of the home, the media assets, and the way we tell the story, we're setting expectations. If we oversell it, we set ourselves up to disappoint people when they walk in. If we undersell it, we don't get their attention in the first place. So there's a balance there. And getting that balance right, that's what brings the right buyers through the door. They already understand the value because all of this condition, presentation, and positioning, it directly impacts how a buyer feels. And that feeling translates into the price they'll pay. Trying to save money by skipping prep work, that usually costs you more than you will have imagined. If you do the right work up front, you attract more buyers and you put yourself in a position to possibly control the negotiations. Preparation creates leverage. If you're thinking about selling and wondering where to start, I'm happy to walk through your home with you and give you a clear plan. Not everything, just the right things, because getting it ready the right way, that's what sets everything else up. Recent real estate surveys show there are 5 questions just about every seller is asking right now. We've talked about price, we've talked about timing, and we've talked about preparation. Welcome back to the HRG TV studio. Now let's get into the next one. How long will it take to sell my home? The median days on market so far this year for Maine is 41 and even higher in Harpswell at 64 days. There's much that can affect days on market, a lot more than most people think. A lot of sellers still believe homes either sell quickly or they don't. While that's true in its simplest form, many also believe it's more luck than skill. And it's usually not. It's price, preparation, and presentation. They all directly impact how long a home takes to sell. If the price is too high for the market, buyers hesitate. If the home isn't prepared properly, they start mentally calculating work, inconvenience, and cost. And if the presentation or positioning miss the mark, the right buyers may never even look at it. Those 3 things work together. And when they're aligned properly, that's when homes tend to move quickly. There's a reason my last Harpswell listing sold in just a few days, while other Harpswell properties that came on the market afterward are still sitting there. That's not luck. That's preparation, positioning, and understanding how buyers respond. People sometimes call it luck. I don't know. If you believe in luck, let it be LUCK, laboring under correct knowledge. And honestly, a lot of times, the longer a home sits, the more it traces back to pricing decisions made at the beginning, because there's usually a direct relationship between days on market and how far the pricing drifts from what the market is actually willing to support. And I don't say that to criticize anybody. Every property is different. Every seller is different too. And honestly, once you've lived in a home for many years, invested money into it, raised a family there, built memories there, it's completely natural to see the property differently than a buyer does. A seller can sometimes become a little too confident in what they believe the home should be listed for, how buyers should react to it, and even how negotiations should go. And that can create problems because buyers don't want to feel controlled. They want to feel welcomed into the process. That's why strategy matters so much. Proper pricing, preparation, and positioning should allow the seller to stay in control of the negotiations without creating an environment that turns buyers off. You want buyers excited about the property, not nervous about the process. That's why first impressions matter so much now. Not just when somebody walks through the front door, but online, before they ever schedule the showing, because that's where buyers decide if a home feels worth pursuing. And this is where experience matters. Knowing how to price it, how to prepare it, how to present it, how to create the right amount of interest without overselling it. Because if we oversell it, buyers walk in disappointed. If we undersell it, they never show up in the first place. So when someone asks me, how long will it take to sell my home? My answer is usually, that depends on how well we position it from the beginning. Because homes that launch properly, usually create momentum early, and momentum creates leverage. That's where stronger negotiations happen. That's where sellers stay in control. The goal isn't just to sell quickly. The goal is to sell well. If you're thinking about selling and want a realistic conversation about timing, pricing, preparation, and strategy, or anything real estate related, I'm happy to help because the homes that tend to sell the fastest sell for the most. And they usually had the best plan before they ever hit the market. Just because a listing broker is charging less doesn't automatically mean a seller nets more money. Welcome back to the HRG TV studio and the final question in our 5-question seller series. Over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of noise surrounding commissions because of the National Association of Realtors settlement and the changes involving broker compensation. But here's the short answer to the question. What's your commission? In most cases, commissions are still structured as a percentage of the final sale price, although they can also be structured as a flat fee or specific dollar amount. To be clear, each situation is different, and all commissions are negotiable. There is no standard rate. In today's market, sellers should expect the total compensation in the transaction to fall somewhere in that 5 to 6% range. Also, beware, just because you agreed to a total of, let's say, 5% in your listing agreement, it doesn't mean that's all you'll pay. It's all negotiable now, right up to the moment the purchase and sale agreement is signed. Most purchase and sale agreements now include a clause for the buyer's broker fee. That's right. Keep watching. There's more to know. The real change was more transparency, not less commissions. And more transparency doesn't necessarily mean more clarity. It can be quite confusing. In my experience, commissions have always been negotiable. That was true before the settlement, and it's true now. Just because one broker may have said that their commission was non-negotiable, that never meant that the broker right down the road wouldn't negotiate and do it for less. Many did and do. So what's changed? The industry was pushed toward clearer conversations about representation, compensation, and who is paying for what. And overall, that's probably a good thing, even though it has expanded the conversation, because buyers and sellers should understand who represents them, what services are being provided, and what they're paying for. But I think the most important thing the settlement did was redirect the conversation from not just what do you charge, but what exactly am I getting for that? And that conversation has continued evolving to this day. The Department of Justice also weighed in on the idea of what's called decoupling. In simple terms, that means separating the listing broker's compensation from the buyer broker's compensation and treating them as two completely separate conversations. Now, how that's handled can vary quite a bit depending on the brokerage and their internal policies. Some larger companies, attempting to stay ahead of potential future litigation, have moved toward a more decoupled approach, meaning they'll first discuss and establish the compensation for their own listing services, and then separately advise the seller on how they may want to respond to requests for compensation coming from buyer brokers. And there's logic behind that. It creates clearer disclosure, cleaner conversations, and more transparency surrounding who is paying for what. But from a practical standpoint, sellers still need to understand how buyer agents operate in the real world, because buyer agents are still bringing buyers to properties. They're still scheduling showings, advising clients, writing offers, coordinating inspections, handling negotiations, and helping transactions get to the closing table. So regardless of how the compensation conversation is structured, it still comes back to the reality that in most situations, sellers should be prepared for the total compensation involved in the transaction to fall somewhere in that 5 to 6% range. The difference now is less about the amount itself and more about how the conversation is disclosed, structured, and negotiated. Because at the end of the day, buyers and sellers don't care about industry policy debates. What they care about is who's paying for what services are actually being provided, and are they getting their money's worth? And Those are fair questions. We all recognize that buying and selling real estate involves a lot more than driving around showing homes or sticking a sign in the ground and putting a listing in the MLS. Price strategy matters, preparation matters, presentation matters, negotiation matters, exposure matters, time on market. All of those things directly impact what a seller ultimately walks away with. A lower commission structure doesn't necessarily create a better outcome for the seller, and a higher commission structure doesn't guarantee one either. The real question is, what is the strategy? How is the property being positioned? How are buyers being targeted? How are negotiations being managed? And ultimately, what kind of outcome is being created for the seller? Because there's usually a direct relationship between preparation, positioning, leverage, and the final result. Some brokers know how to create listing momentum immediately, while others sit on the market reducing price and losing the seller's leverage. And most of that gets determined before the listing ever goes live. That's where experience matters, not personality, not promises. Sellers need to rethink how they see the listing broker's role and compensation. The goal isn't to pay the least compensation possible to sell a home. The goal is to net the strongest overall result. It's to protect your equity, to reduce your exposure financially, and the question you must ask yourself is this: do you believe this broker has the ability to do this? Because sometimes the cheapest way to sell a home can become the most expensive mistake.